This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the good news environmentally this week was that there is no tropical system in the Gulf heading our way. The bad news is that there is a saltwater wedge moving upriver. We'll analyze both tonight, as well as a major feature in the Advocate newspapers about the long-range impact that rising sea levels will have on our area. Though river waters are slow to rise, insurance rates are reaching flood levels, and that's causing problems with state insurance regulators. That story and rising tensions at Orleans Parish Prison and the latest on the gubernatorial race are on the list for tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Gabriella Killett, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, LeBron Joseph, anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV Channel 26, and Gordon Russell, managing editor and investigations, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And we're going to stay with Gordon right now because you guys have done a really eye-opening series over there at the paper about rising sea level, rising water, sea level rise, on top of what we've already been experiencing in the Louisiana coast with erosion and subsidence. And basically the headline was, this is going to upend our lives. It's a real problem. Tell us what you all have found.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've been talking about this for years and years, but we try to take stock of it every so often in a big way, because I think one of the challenges with sea level rise and coastal erosion is that it's happening quickly in geological terms, but in like the course of people's lives, it's happening slowly. So we chose to look at 2050 partly because that's a date we can all sort of picture. It's a little off in the distance, but not too far off in the distance. So we looked at what the state might look like by then, and it's pretty sobering, as you might expect if you've been reading about this for years. And we might lose another 800 square miles of coastline by then. We've already lost 2,000 square miles of coastline in the last century. So we tried to look at this both through different lenses. You know, there's sort of an aggressive, there's a optimistic and pessimistic sea level rise scenarios, and then also we have some agency in this as far as what we do with coastal restoration, and we tried to look at that too, whether we do all of the projects that are proposed or we don't do them, or we only do some of them. And to be honest, the bigger factor is going to be how fast the sea rises as opposed to what we do, but we do have some say in how this plays out.
So as you note, I mean, this is something we've been discussing for a while, and I mean, for decades and decades. And when we levied the river for flood protection, it was known then that this was going to interfere with the natural process of sediment building our delta. But now with the sea level rise and climate change on top of the coastal erosion and the land subsidence, as you said, things are really speeding up a bit. Now, the state has its updated coastal master plan for different types of projects. But to do those projects, we have to have the money.
Correct. And we were cursed and blessed with the BP oil spill, which has really taken care of our share of the funding for a lot of these projects in the near term. But that money's going to run out in less than a decade. Yeah. And the question is, what's going to replace it? And there's nothing certain at all. I mean, Louisiana's hoping we can get a bigger share of offshore oil and gas revenues, possibly wind revenues, but none of that is settled, and it's going to require a lot of money. A
lot of money that, the state is coming up with some of it, but we are looking to the feds to help with some of these projects. But we aren't the only one now, because the issue of coastal erosion, some other states are taking a look at that. And then also with climate change and stronger storms and more frequent storms, they're feeling the impact, and they're going to be asking for money too, like New York and Florida.
Right. I mean, everybody's kind of in a pickle of one sort or another. Obviously, a lot of states have the rising seas, and then you're seeing other impacts of climate change create all kinds of other emergencies that might need federal help too. Everything from forest fires, and I mean, there's just everywhere you look, there's things happening. So we're not going to be the only ones competing for help here.
Has anything worked? I mean, every few years we hear about a new project, and this is in place and good news, but has anything been successful?
Yeah, I think a lot of these projects are demonstrably successful. One of the challenges is that they immediately start, they'll build 20 square miles of land with a project, but then it starts eroding. They don't last forever. They're subject to the same erosion that everything else is. But the big one that everyone's crossing their fingers for is the Barataria diversion, which is just getting started, and that's sort of the most ambitious one. They've begun. It's $2.5 billion, and is meant to mimic the natural land building properties of the river. And there's some evidence that works because we've got these natural crevasses that have formed further downriver. Neptune Pass is one that have built, you can see sandbars and land being built in those places.
Right. The graphics that you all have, that you can look at online, certainly, it's really startling to see what our coastline could possibly look like. By year 2100, the whole bottom of the coast is gone.
Yeah, and if you look at it, it is sobering. And if you look now, a lot of it already is gone. And, there's been talk of this over the years, the shape of the boot of Louisiana. Well, the boots had a lot of holes in it for a long time, but by 2100, a lot of those holes have become, all of it's gone instead of just having little parts gone. But yeah, I would recommend, if we give our website a little plug here, we have some very cool animated graphics and things that you can look at to show you how this will evolve over time.
So basically you guys are publishing this to make people more aware of what actually could happen and to have us prepared, and also to try to make us more resilient to it too.
Yeah, I think this is one of those challenges because humans think in the short run typically, and this is one of those things that you got to think a little bit in the longer run if we're going to be, if we're going to preserve some of, Southeast Louisiana. Right now, the communities really on the coast are on the front line, but we're just behind them.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, I fished down in Hopedale and Delacroix. A lot of the places we fished 10 or 15 years ago, if they're there, some of the outer islands, they're very small, and it is alarming. And looking at the graphics that you put, even the communities farther up, are affected or gone on there, and it's pretty sobering. You're right.
Yeah.
So we have decisions to make down the line as we see this progress. It could possibly not be as bad as the worst case scenario presented in the Coastal Master Plan. Depends on sea level rise, climate change, how we handle that. But we have to start thinking about how to build more resilient buildings, maybe relocate communities.
Yeah, I think all those things have to be on the table. Some places are probably not going to be able to be saved no matter what, but we definitely have to start thinking about engineering solutions.
So this is a reality that we're living with now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of those communities are tribal communities.
Yeah, some indigenous.
They've been here a long time, and so you have a social issue on top of all of that. There are people
Cultural
living
issue.
with it.
Yeah, and some have been relocated already.
Yep.
All right, so we have this reality before us now. How to deal with this? We have the present day reality of a saltwater wedge moving up the Mississippi River.
Yeah, I was looking that up a second ago. 1939, 1940 was one as well. Not the first time. It's before all of our lifetimes. Wait a minute, Errol, I think it's before your lifetime as well.
It is.
Yes, and creating worry because of the effect or the possible effects on drinking water. Obviously, the communities that line the Mississippi River, that is where we get our drinking water. Already being affected is Plaquemines Parish, Lower Plaquemines, effect on the Belle Chase purification down there. St. Bernard is next, and then Orleans. Of course, the governor is speaking, or spoke today, I should say, to address this. It's being seen as pretty much an emergency. And the engineering of it pretty much is the lack of rainwater from up north and the lack of flow in the river has created a situation where the salt water from the Gulf is washing upriver. There are images of sand berms that you can see in the river, further up north. And not very far up north, Baton Rouge, places like that, where you can actually see that in aerial images. Also, anyone that lives here, if you live near the river, Algiers Point or whatever, it doesn't take me telling you, you can walk outside and see that the river is low. This particular phenomenon, I don't remember it in my lifetime of having, that threat of, hey guys, the drinking water could be compromised. I think we're in a place where trying to sound the alarm, on the one hand, that, hey, this is a real reality, but also trying not to alarm folks so much that we're sending folks in a frenzy. Already seeing a little bit of that because people are buying the water up. The big box stores, the Costco's and Sam's, or I won't say rationing them out, but they're doing so many 100 cases or whatever daily. You can't go into any store this time of the evening, for the most part, any of the big boxes. Even by noon earlier today, both of those stores were pretty much out of water.
So you're talking in the metro area?
In the metro area, that is correct.
Not just Plaquemines Parish?
No. This is in New Orleans. And that is obviously concerning. I would imagine folks will be buying water in different places because the drinking water supply is that's all Mississippi River for all of us, and if in fact it's compromised, then in fact we're going to have to figure out a way to get some drinking water for our families.
Sets off alarm bells on everybody, but
it's kind of the pandemic, if you will, with the toilet paper and the rest of that stuff.
Well, Plaquemines folks, saying,
Sure.
wait a minute, Plaquemines Parish, we need this water right
Yes.
now, so please, folks, north of us, just hold off on buying your water, because Lake Jefferson Parish President Cynthia Lee Shang said, really, we're weeks away. You don't have to worry about that if it happens at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if we buy 3 cases of water right now, we'll probably drink it up by the time we really need it. One point my wife made a little early, she says, LeBron, this is not like the pandemic insofar as everyone was affected, the entire country. And if in fact there is a water emergency, even if it's all 4 or 5 of the parishes, one would think that we can get water supply from other parts of the country brought in, as opposed to when in fact everybody was buying the toilet paper in Texas and Michigan
Jefferson
and all
Parish
that.
is sending water to Plaquemines Parish.
And then the Corps of Engineers is barging water from further up the river down to the intakes lower down the river so they can increase their capacity.
But if it reaches New Orleans, aren't they projecting like early October, which isn't that far away? But
yeah, because of the water that's already stored up. Every municipality has their tanks and all that. The other part of that, however, is affecting or at least attempting to address if the saltwater gets here, and the technology of the reverse osmosis that everyone claims will be the solution, or at least a means of them converting the water that's even been contaminated with sodium, that they can sort of make it available.
There's also concern beyond the drinking water that what it'll do to the pipes and to all the plumbing.
Pipes, appliances, all of those things that we don't know.
And of course, the Corps has been working to try to block that wedge a bit.
Yes.
And building a sill.
Yeah, not entirely successfully.
No,
That is
not
correct.
entirely. It's it's a big one, and it's gone on for a while.
Well, and that sill has to have a space that ships can get through as well. So
Which water also can get
the
through.
salt water still comes upriver on.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
yet another challenge that
Yes,
we're
it
trying
is.
to confront head on. All right, thanks a lot, LeBron. All right, Gabby, over to you, because some news out of Orleans Parish Jail. There have been some problems over there where actually some supervisors just stepped away saying this is overwhelming.
Yes, within the last week, we know that some supervisors walked out of the jail based on the fact that inmates are accused of setting fires in an area of the jail and throwing bits and pieces from their designated cells into the fires, which have reportedly been in the public shared spaces. So the supervisors, as you might imagine, got a bit spooked and then ended up speaking with the sheriff herself, Susan Hudson, and the warden, the assistant warden of the facility, and got a second to themselves and gathered themselves and went back to work inside the pod. So
Now, they're understaffed. That's what we're hearing right now. I mean, what's the possibility of them getting a chance to staff up?
So what we've heard is that the fully staffed Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office looks like 900 employees, at least half of whom are staffing the jail. Right now we're at 702 employees in the Sheriff's Office. So we do have a little ways to go to reach that fully staffed number. That being said, they have seen recruiting efforts be successful recently. They just had another class of recruits graduate. So we're hoping, in the same way that we're hoping for NOPD, that steadily, slowly but steadily, we will see the increase and hopefully get to that full staffing requirement.
What about wages? Any chance for, pay raise increases?
I'm not sure. All I know about wages is that the starting salary is $18 an hour, not a particularly competitive wage, I think an expert might say. But, nonetheless, that's what we're seeing and dealing with.
So
Imagine the pitch. Your job is to guard prisoners. How much they get? $18. That's a hard sell.
it's not an easy job, that's for sure. But let's go back to the fire situation. The question on my mind when I first read this is like, how are they starting these fires?
Who's got a lighter in there?
Yeah, exactly.
What are we
Right.
doing here?
So OPSO hasn't told us specifically if there's like a fire starter or where the fire, as in the flames themselves, are coming from. But what we do know is that one fire that took place in the early hours around 12:40 a.m. September 6th was started with a piece of an exposed wire that OPSO is saying came from a damaged part of a prisoner's cell that he used as a wick to then light and throw out of the trap door of his individual cell into the public area. And from there, the fire grew, and 6 inmates total are accused of throwing bits and pieces of flammable materials out of their cells to grow the blaze itself.
That's an extremely dangerous situation. And it's happened more than once.
That is correct.
We got in right after the riot, mini riot, whatever that was, last year. And the manner in which, the sheriff's walking us through and pointing out different things, and the manner in which these guys are creative and enterprising and destroying so much of what's up there, and taking something like the cap from a deodorant thing, sticking it in the door where the door is supposed to close, and the door appears to be closed. It closes electronically. It appears to be closed, but because the cap is in there, they can then open it up, and that, they claim, is what happened when all of these guys got out and sort of trashed the place and flooded the entire deal and everything.
So in these latest incidents, what's the response from the sheriff about this?
So it's alarming for everyone. They were almost immediately rebooked. 6 of the inmates that I know for sure in the September 6th fire with aggravated arson. So it doesn't seem like they're playing around. They're definitely approaching it for what it is, which is criminal activity to start a fire in that way. And I guess we'll see as time moves forward if any other plans present themselves. One of the things that we are here, sources are telling us, is that there could potentially be a trustee-esque system in the jail, which people have raised concerns about because there is, self-governance there, and I guess we'll see if any of that might help.
Okay, all right, thanks a lot, Gabby.
Thank you.
Okay, E, over to you, talking politics.
Well, there were 3 stories today this week having to do with endorsements. The biggest was that the newspaper, the Picayune Advocate, endorsed Stephen Wagespack, who used to be the head of Laborde and is running. It's really an impressive record. So, like, the media story is that back when the Advocate was the Advocate in Baton Rouge, under the Manship family, they never endorsed. That was their tradition. I think he might have been feeling like he was sitting in a minefield being in Baton Rouge doing endorsements or something, but they never did it. But now that merged with the Picayune, and so this is probably the first time that the name Advocate has been attached to a gubernatorial endorsement. And people always ask, well, do endorsements do that much good? Well, as a rule, they don't, but sometimes the circumstances come in play very much. And the example I used was in 1987, when there was about 6 major candidates, and the guy running behind, last among the 6, was Buddy Roemer. And then one Sunday, the Times-Picayune endorsed Roemer. And that became big news, one, because it was the New Orleans newspaper endorsing a congressman from upstate. And all the other news media picked it up. And the other newspapers started doing it too. And so it kind of created a bandwagon effect, which all of a sudden Roemer from last started rallying. And on election day, he got like 33% of the vote, which was more than the front runner Edwin Edwards got. And Edwards dropped out, and so he was elected on that. But really kind of all started with that Picayune endorsement, because that kind of made him the good government candidate. And people were looking, man, give us a good government candidate. And so I thought that was one time when it really had an impact. Congressman Scalise endorsed Landry this week, and they were both, at one point Landry was in Congress, and he said, "Oh, we knew each other, we were good friends," and all of this. And then Richard Nelson, who's one of the candidates, and he's a representative from Mandeville, was not doing well in the polls, was really kind of showing at the bottom, and so he dropped out, and he endorsed Landry too, which makes political sense, because if you're going to drop out of the race and you're running last, why endorse somebody who's not going to win either, okay? And so if you're going to endorse somebody who has a chance. There are rumors that Nelson might like the idea that Wagaspat had as president of Laborde, but there could also be other possibilities. And so overall, in the endorsement rally, I guess Scalise won the week, but Wagaspat at least got a major boost this week.
Yeah, a major endorsement. But still, Landry leads in the polls and also in the money.
Substantially. And it's not impossible. People are starting to look at the numbers, especially now that one candidate has dropped out and the possibility of maybe another one. It's not impossible that Landry could win in the primary. Or if not, it'll be close and force getting somebody into the runoff.
Early voting starts fairly soon. Do you know the date for early voting? I don't
30th.
remember.
Yeah.
30? Well, real soon. All righty, thanks a lot. Okay, Gordon, back on over to you. You had a piece about our homeowners insurance and the situation that we're facing right now with that, which in part is caused by the storms that we keep having here, which maybe is influenced by climate change. Everything's sort of linked together. What you basically wrote about, though, was Jim Donlan's really concerned about not enough citizens and not enough residents are rolling off this Louisiana citizens rolls right now.
Right.
They should be.
Right, and Donlan's, in his last few months as insurance commissioner, he's retiring, and he's very concerned that the Louisiana Citizens, which is the state's insurer of last resort, he's been trying to shrink the rolls, and it hasn't happened, and they have 140,000 policyholders now, which is as many as they've had since going back to right after Hurricane Katrina. And they've got a company called SafePoint that's willing to take on up to 40,000 policyholders. Well, actually, the deadline to do this was today. So, but he was concerned that not a lot of people are taking advantage of that, and he had offered some theories. He thought maybe agents weren't telling their customers. Maybe agents, they get a bigger commission if the policy's more expensive. He said maybe that's why they're not doing it. I talked to a few agents who really pushed back on that, though, and said that there's other reasons why people may prefer to stay on Citizens than go to this company that they don't know very much about, which may have differences in their policies, higher hurricane deductibles, maybe other things in the fine print.
Or you won't get the benefit if there is a disaster and this company folds, when in fact you feel Louisiana Citizens is here.
Exactly.
And the state will pay me.
That's right.
If we need a roof.
I think people have been scarred by the events of the last few years, and I think even though the citizens' rates by law are quite high, there's people are leery of what they might be getting themselves into.
Well, Donlan, who of course is did not seek re-election, who will be leaving the office by the end of the year, he has ordered agents to let customers know if they're eligible to roll off Louisiana Citizens.
Yeah, and there's no evidence that agents have not been doing that, but he issued a specific directive because I think he was suspicious that out of the 40,000 people eligible, only maybe 15,000 people had actually done it, and he thinks that is a suspiciously low number, and that if everybody knew they had this opportunity, that number would be higher. But his version of this is, his view of this is everybody just looks at the premium, and the premiums are significantly lower with SafePoint. And some of the agents I spoke with said, well, there's a lot of other reasons why you might not want to do it.
Well, one thing we know is that Tim Temple, who's like the insurance commissioner-elect, has said that once he's in office, he's going to ask for a special session legislature dealing with insurance. And in 2 debates so far, all of the candidates have been asked, would they favor a special session? All of them say yes.
Yeah.
And so we know that in the first part of the year, insurance is going to be a big issue.
Yeah, and the one thing I think that another story I wrote that I'll mention real quick if there's time is this fortified roofs program, which is interesting, and the state's helping to pay. They're giving grants of up to $10,000 for people to put stronger roofs on their homes, which then result in lower insurance premiums, and it seems to have a lot of support. The challenges are there's only enough money in the first batch for 3,000 grants, and maybe 500,000 people might need these.
Yeah.
And there's also worries that the sort of wealthy people will run out and get these grants first, and that sort of thing. But that's something you might see a big expansion of something like that.
In the first round, it's just Louisiana citizens?
So the very first round, so the first year there's 3,000 grants. The first round of 500 you can apply starting October 2nd, and those will only go to Citizens policyholders. And the reason for that is because the state is hoping to get people off of Citizens, and they hope that if people have stronger roofs, other insurance companies will want to take these people.
And SafePoint is one insurer that has taken a lot of residents now as policyholders. Donlan says SafePoint is a strong company.
He gives it the thumbs up, yeah.
He gives them, and not worried about insolvency down the line.
That's what he says, yeah. I'm not saying otherwise, I'm just saying that's what he says.
SafePoint policyholders, hope that's true.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Gordon. Other stories, E, let's go over to you.
Oh, the Monday there's going to be a press conference at the Memorial Convention Center to announce a new museum, a civil rights museum, Louisiana Civil Rights Museum. It's going to be in the convention center in Hall A, and it's part of the civil rights trail that they're developing around the state, which is very good, by the way, and it's supposed to open like in October. Interesting, it's in the building named after Memorial, who during his career, every time he elected to something, he was the first black to, to be a judge, to be a senator, to be
Law
mayor.
school.
Appropriate to be there. Thanks, Lottie. Copy.
In addition to the problems at the jail, we're also looking into the Orleans Parish Justice Center reaching capacity, as well as the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center also reaching capacity. Okay. So we're looking into more jail stuff this week.
Okay, LeBron?
On a lighter note, much lighter, it's the Fall Fest season, and starting this weekend with Beignet Fest. If you pass City Park, you can't miss it. It's a big old deal tomorrow. And from there on, Nola by Nola, Fried Chicken Fest, all of the stuff we got coming in the coming weeks.
All righty. Yeah. Gordon?
2 things I'll plug real quick that are coming this Sunday. We have a story about how Louisiana, unlike all of its neighbors, has been losing population stagnating, I should say, over the last 40 years or so, and the question is why. And then we also have another installment in a series we've been doing on infant mortality and why Louisiana has such high rates of that. All
right. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. And thank you all for joining us. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
All right, Joe.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.